Welcome back to the channel. My name is Jeff. This is Not Just Book Reviews, and today I'm going to be talking about Stephen King and Peter Straub's 1984 opus, The Talisman. I wanted to choose The Talisman for a few reasons. Number one, it's top 3 Stephen King books for me. And number two, I don't see it reviewed a lot on BookTube. And there's a ton of Stephen King on BookTube. Like, there's enormous amounts of Stephen King. He's one of the most reviewed writers, I think, on BookTube. Everybody reviews him. And it's kind of fascinating that all generations read King. So you've got young 20-somethings reading King. Us old farts have read King or continue to read King. So it's amazing that he's like the wallpaper of BookTube in some ways. But I don't hear a lot of reviews or see a lot of reviews about The Talisman. And I think it's one of his best books. So he wrote it with Peter Straub. Now, Peter Straub is also a horror writer. I've tried to read Coco twice, and I've stalled out probably maybe a third of the way through Coco. It starts really well, and I hopefully will finish it someday. But I haven't read any other Straub, and I know Ghost Story is touted as like the Peter Straub novel to read. And I know Straub has written a lot of horror. So yeah, I mean, he's kind of on my TBR a little bit. Ghost Story is definitely on my TBR. But I guess they met, I think Straub, I think they're both American, but I think they met in London. A little bit of what I read about it. And they started a correspondence in the 70s, and eventually they were like, hey, we got to do something together. And then they hit on this idea of The Talisman, which was then released in 1984. And it's interesting because when you read it, you don't know when it's King and when it's Straub. Sometimes I feel like I do know it's King. There are chapters that are kind of sliver chapters that are devoted to the bad guy, whose name is Morgan Sloat, that feel very King to me. But I've read interviews where they each tried to imitate each other's style. So there are some sections where Straub said he tried to write like King, and King said in some sections he tried to write like Straub. So they must have had a ball doing it. But again, I really like it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this. And mostly what I liked about The Talisman is, first of all, the epic scope of it. It's about 700 and some odd pages in this mass market paperback. By the way, I love mass market paperbacks. I don't know. Obviously, prestige hardcovers seem to be the thing now. Everyone's unboxing their Easton Press editions. But I find as a reader, there are like the nice editions you put on the shelf, and then there are the things that you throw in your knapsack or your car and you read. And I've just always had a fondness for mass market paperbacks. It's just, you can beat them up. They're unwieldy and big and fat, but like, this is like the meat and potatoes of a reader. Like, this is a book you read. If I had a really nice edition of The Talisman, it would probably just sit on my shelf. Am I going to really bring around some big hardcover book when I'm on the subway or when I'm traveling? No. I mean, to me, the mass market paperback is like book technology. Like, how do you beat this? Like, easy to tab, easy to underline. It fits everywhere. It's brilliant. So anyway, a little plug. I love mass market paperbacks. And there's some books I feel like you want to read in a mass market paperback. Like, I'm eventually going to read David Copperfield. I'll probably get a nice trade edition, or if I can find maybe a hardcover, I would maybe do that. But like for The Talisman and for a lot of fantasy novels, mass market is the way to go. So anyway, just a little side about my love for mass markets. So it starts really well. It starts off with the seaside town up in kind of Maine or New England, somewhere right on the coast. And you meet Jack Sawyer, probably taken from Tom Sawyer, because this is kind of a quest opus, the way Tom Sawyer was, right? Adventure novel. And he's with his mom, his aging mom, Lily Kavanaugh Sawyer, who's sick. She used to be a B-movie actress, and she's now in this hotel convalescing and kind of dying, we get a sense. And they're running from this guy named Morgan Sloat, who used to be Jack's father's business partner. Now, Jack's dad and Lily's husband, Phil, has died. I believe it's been like a year. It hasn't been that long. And Morgan is after them because he wants their half of the business. He wants to buy them out. Lily doesn't want to sell. So already in the real world, we're getting a sense that, what's happening with the two of them. So it starts out very slow, Jack wandering around the area of the hotel, seeing strange things. He meets an old man named Speedy Parker. And this is his introduction to kind of this magical place where he's going to go. Basically, it turns out that Jack has access to a power that allows him to flip into a parallel world called the Territories. And the Territories, it's in the same geographical location as the United States, but it's in another dimension, and it's much smaller. So the way they work it out, King kind of works this out a little bit, where if you walk a mile in the Territories, it's like walking 10 or 15 miles here. There's kind of this amplitude that happens between the two in that way. So he finds out, and then he has memories of his dad and some strange things that his dad was into, and he puts this together with now his ability. So Speedy teaches him how to flip into this new world. He does it, and they both kind of realize that there's a woman over in the Territories who's what they call the twinner of his mother, who's also sick, and she's the queen of the Territories. And Jack needs to save his mom to save this queen. The only way to do that is to get all the way across the country to the Pacific Coast. There's another hotel called the Black Hotel. And in there is this thing called the Talisman, which will heal his mom, save his mom, and of course, also the queen of the Territories. So that's kind of laid out right at the beginning. And then Jack flips into the Territories and he's off. And we're off on this wonderful adventure. So I will say this about it, that the best parts of the Talisman take place in our world as we know it, well, as King knew it in 1983. Not a lot takes place in the Territories. There are some scenes that do. If you look at both King and Straub, what do they mostly do? They mostly set their stories in the present, in the real world. That's kind of their thing. So writing kind of a Tolkien-esque fantasy land is not their strength. So you don't get a lot of time in the Territories. There's some brief flips and some brief things that happen there, but the world building in the Territories is very weak. It just could be like, medieval Old West, as it were, kind of, think the Gunslinger a little bit. But it's really the fact that it exists and the relationship between it to our world and some of the things that happen between them, I won't spoil, are really fun. And they do play into a fun plot. But again, most of the best parts take place in our world, and there are these wonderful, long drawn out scenes that King is so good at. I don't know if Straub is, because I haven't read a ton of Straub, but they feel very King-like, some of the real creepier sequences. And the one thing that, that you really get in this book is, at the very least, what King does well. And I know more King than Straub, but say what you want about King as a writer, and he has his flaws. I mean, I'm not a huge fan. I am a fan when I think his books are, a little truncated and forward-moving, and they don't sprawl out all over the place. Like, I do like his writing. He is very good at putting you someplace in a setting. He's very good with dialogue. He's good with character, and he's really good with just you in the place. And he does it very economically, very quickly. He can take his time and even get you there even more, but he's very good at that. And I think it's interesting because it's what makes him a very odd writer. He straddles the line. I think he really wants to be taken seriously as a serious fiction writer. I think the establishment's not interested. But he has chops, like he has writer chops. He knows what has to happen for good fiction to occur. To me, often he doesn't have the depth of a really great writer. His characters tend to be, they're serviceable. There's no grand themes in King's work, and this is the same thing. I feel like this was a chance for him to kind of step up and do a grand themed fantasy, because he was using Tolkien as his model. I think one of his influences, he's like, I wanted to write my version of Lord of the Rings, and this was it. But the main character, Jack, is, he's a scrappy kid, and we like him. And he's a tough, and he toughs his way out of scrapes, and he's not the brightest penny in the change drawer, but he's smart enough to get out of some things, and he has a good heart, and he's a good friend and a good companion, right? He's a good guy. The problem with this book is that it's very episodic. and that you go from one adventure to the next. And basically, the plot is you've got to. It's one of those plots. I think a friend and I have this thing where we say it's one of those plots where, you know, the hero just has to get all the way over there. You know, in movies and TV, there are certain plots where he's just like, all right, here's the whole movie. We just have to get there. All right, let's go. You know, and that's the movie. This is very much the Talisman. So it's not, this Jack doesn't have any kind of inner demons or inner flaws or inner worries about some catastrophe that's going to happen. It's very linear in that, like, will or will he not get the talisman and save his mom? So it doesn't make for a reading experience that builds, right? And I think King is particularly susceptible to this in that he's one of the best openers. He opens books wonderfully. He sets you in great places very authentically. He has these cool concepts in his head. And then you set out, and little by little, the returns diminish because, to me, his characters often don't have inner lives or inner turmoil. And they don't build. You know, symphonically, they don't tend to build to a climax. They kind of arrive at a climax. And if you are a King fan, as I am, you know, the man cannot end a book, you know. And so his endings tend to be very anticlimactic for two reasons. One of the main ones is that his characters aren't developing and they don't show any dynamics. So when they hit the climax, it's really the situational climax of the story, not the inner climax of the character, which I think always undercuts the latter parts of his books. He's just kind of, you know, he's knocking down plot points and you're finishing the book and you're like, oh, okay, he's going to fight the bad guy now. And you're like, okay. So Talisman does suffer from that. It's very episodic. There are episodes that just kind of happen. Jack has obstacles to get into the world. There are some things that build a little bit in terms of his ability to get into the territories. But ultimately, what I found is when you get to the end of the book and he acquires these partners. So there's one for a while called Wolf, who's actually a werewolf. It's a really great character. It kind of reminded me of this character in The Strand. Moon, you know, spells moon, right? Very similar kind of character, very strong, but kind of not very bright. And that character comes for a while. Then he also winds up meeting up with the son of his archenemy, Richard Sloat, who actually is a good guy. And so, you know, when they're together with these characters and there's dialogue, like, it's good. You know, they're kind of figuring things out. And those characters tend to have richer lives, actually, strangely enough, where our main characters tends to be static. Wolf has issues that he's going through. There's a nice little character arc for Wolf. And Richard Sloat as well grows from someone who is in denial about this whole thing to someone who makes very real world, hard decisions to kind of move forward with his life. So you have and I think sometimes when that happens, you're like, oh, Jack's kind of a flat character because which sometimes the hero is, right? Sometimes the hero just is a flat character. He's the one character that doesn't change. And that's definitely a trope. And that's more like, for me, from the King that I have read, more like that. But what's good about the Talisman is the enmeshment of the reader. So King and or Straub, they really just put you in these wonderful places. And then they build these incredibly tension-filled scenes, which King is great at. There's a long sequence near the beginning of the book where Jack gets stuck in a kind of podunk town in like Western New York. And he's working at a bar and the guy won't let him leave. And it's classic King where, you know, it's just a really harsh environment and he really describes the bar really well and the people that come into it and Jack's troubles to get out. And then there are beings from the other world flipping in and out. It's a great sequence. And then the second best sequence is later on out west, he winds up in sort of this religious leader's boys' home. And, you know, if you know King, you know that what a field day he's going to have with all of that. And that's another really good scene because he's just filled with, when you go into that place, you're meeting all these new characters briefly, but there's already a hierarchy about what are the good kids, the bad kids. So there's this whole social scene in that place, which makes for very intense and engaging reading as well. So that's really good. It's a really good sequence. And it's just kind of, it really is an adventure novel. You're really, you know, it's not the deepest thing in the world, but you're really along for the ride. And they really do the work. I feel like they really do the work in putting you there. Wherever it is that they decide to set scenes, they really are doing the work to make you feel that it's real, that you are there. These places exist. And I think that's what King does best of anything that he does is rarely do you have a believability problem of where characters are, the scene that they are, the time, place that they are. He's so good at that, and he does it almost effortlessly. That anything else that comes down the pipe, you're half ready to receive because he's put you in this place so quickly. The problem, of course, as with most King novels, is the ending is very anticlimactic. And again, it's mostly because you're not really building. You've come through 700 plus pages with Jack, and you're kind of as tired as he is, and you're like, oh, it's in one sense, it's exciting that he's finally gotten to this place to get this thing. And there's a little bit of a thrill with that, but it's not kind of what it should be, I think, for a climax of a 700-page novel. I feel like really, the horses should be kind of coming home when you get to that place. And it was a very anticlimactic ending. And the way that the bad guy dies is kind of it's not a cheat, and I recognize why King did it, and I think it was smart, but it was also kind of unsatisfying. And I don't want to spoil much of it, so I won't get into too much detail. There's one character, a bad guy character. The son is named Rule, and I was laughing because I think J.R.R. Tolkien's middle name is Rule. I think it's Ronald Rule Tolkien, so I wondered if there was any connection there. There are a couple of really memorable scenes, just brief snippets when they're in the territories that are beautiful. But again, the territories world building it's kind of a Westernish medieval setting. Not much really going on there. These guys are comfortable in our world, and that's where really the guts of the book takes place. So a sequel was released, I think in the 2000s, called Black House, and it picks up with now the adult Jack as the hero of this novel. He's a private detective. I think he's a Los Angeles homicide detective, and he's in Wisconsin. And the book goes from there. And I haven't read it yet. I just reread The Talisman. So I was kind of interested. I have the Black House and a nice mass market paperback ready to go. I started to read a few reviews, but they weren't very flattering. So I'm like, I need to stop reading reviews and just plunge in. On the Wikipedia page, supposedly there's a third book coming, that the two of them have planned a final book, or at least a third book. So I'm not sure, where Black House leaves Jack or any other characters maybe that we might know. So that's a curiosity. And there was some, I think last year, they're bringing it to Netflix. So I think it's in development now to come to Netflix. And it'll be a fun Netflix show. I mean, again, I don't think it's going to be much, but if they do it right and they kind of just stick to the main story, and maybe they can find someone who can give it a little something extra, who could make it a little more building than it is, that might be nice. But I'll check it out when it comes to Netflix. I wish they'd just get Frank Darabont to write every Stephen King adaptation, because he's the best at it, But anyway, so that's The Talisman, Stephen King, Peter Straub. One of my top 3 King books. I really love it. I'm not sure why folks haven't talked more about it on BookTube. Maybe because it's not a pure King novel. Who knows? But anyway, highly recommend it. If you're into a longish winter adventure read, pick up The Talisman.